This video is in two segments. First, I will show you an art journal page inspired by a Degas print, Dancer on Stage, and a music stencil that I used to create the page. The second segment is an art along where I fast forward through the process of making the art journal page and discussing it in detail. Hi, today I'm going to show you a journal page that I did for an art group that I'm in called Art for the Creative Mind. And this is not it, but I want to show you, before I get into showing the journal page to you, I want to show you some of the things and the tools that I used and how I got there. I first tried on some different stenciling techniques on a piece of just plain copy paper. And I kind of want to show you how I got from this to this, which is my journal page. Now I'm just going to show this to you briefly, and I'll come back to that. Some of the things I used were this punchinella, which they say it's scrap from when they make sequins, and a music stencil. And then what I did, and what I really want to show you, was I used an art print from Degas of the Ballerina. And what I did is I used excuse my reach here, I used weld bond glue, and I coated the print, this is just like out of a book page, on the front with this weld bond, and it dries clear and it makes the paper strong. Then on the back, I adhered a piece of cardstock and used the weld bond again, just as a coating to strengthen the paper. And then I took my X-Acto knife and I hand cut the ballerina out of it, and it made a die cut. And in fact, what I did was I made this die cut, and then I had collaged some text pages onto, you'll see that in my video if you watch it, onto some watercolor paper, and then I traced her again around there and cut out and made another one. Then I took these two into archivers and did an 8 by 11.5 size print. In fact, I did 3 of them, so I came up with ballerinas. Also, and these I just made some masks out of copy paper, because when I used my washes, in fact these ballerinas kind of get stuck onto each other. I use these as masks when I'm stamping or doing washes. And here are my stencils from archivers that I can, after I cut out my images here, that I can use as stencils. And this one was a full sheet of paper, but I cut around there so that when I went to do my sprays, I would spray in there, and then I would get my images, and I could also spray up around in there without having that hard line across. So those are some of the kind of things that I wanted to show you, how I got from this I'm just playing testing page to my final page. Here's the page, another stencil that I made out of Degas Ballerina, which was the inspiration for this page. In fact, here's the original print right here, like that. So, and then as I went through the entire process, I just want to show you a few things. I have this book that it's called, I got it at Goodwill, it's called a figuring book, and I've been using it to do various experiments, and when I get ready to do a project, sometimes I'll copy down a quote. In this case, I sketched a baby face, but here I was testing out my ballerina stencil. Here I found the quote that I used, "She is like a ballerina in an old-fashioned music box." And then I had also had some Chinese paper from when I did the altered coffee filter book with a Chinese theme, and this is all Chinese in here, and then there's a ballerina, stencil of a ballerina in there. And here's another one where I just used the negative image in there, like this, and then I used a flower stencil around that, and I had some steampunk already on that page. And then here is my music stencil that I used, and I was playing with that. Yeah, I had a negative image and a positive image, and I cleaning off my stencil, and here's some towel paper that it went from cleaning my stencil, so I glued it in my figuring book. Here's one page, and you'll see this in my video if you watch this, the process part of my video. Here's the page where I'm beginning to think about how I want my final page to look. But as I was working with this, I flipped my stencil and everything started to come together for me when I got this music in the background. And I found the quote, "She is like a ballerina in an old music box." And then after I went to Archivers and got my printouts of my ballerinas, then I just glued them into these experiment pages here. And I kind of have my own, after I send out my journal page, I kind of have my own journal pages of how it grew. And this is just some more, really, of just when my stencils, cleaning off my stencils here. And I'll go back in and I'll do other things on these pages. But these pages, I think, are pretty complete. So, I just kind of wanted to do a quick review of that. And now I will get to the point to where I will show you. We'll just put this right here. Aren't these fun? Look at these. I had more fun. I made my own stencils out of Degas ballerinas. Okay. So, here's my finished page. And I'm hoping that you can see this with the lighting. It says, "She is like a ballerina in an old music box." And here you can see the dark area. I experimented with several things on here. I have my text page on the back. I used some, when I did the altered book project, when we cut out the little niches for the drawers, I had a whole bunch of text paper left, so I collaged all of that on there. In fact, that's what this is. So, I was having trouble getting that covered with just, I tried the Delusions and I tried the Stays On, and nothing was dark enough for me. Finally, I gave up and did black gesso, and then I glazed it, and it did exactly what I wanted. And then I came in here with my music stencil with a silver Krylon paint pen, metallic. And I don't know if you see the bling I put on here. I've got bling around here for in the music bar. And then back here, I've got a blue background in the back, and that's like if you open a music box, how you sometimes see a mirrored image. And then this is this shadow. I used the stencil to create her in the background as a shadow of her dancing, and then the blue represents a mirror of that music box. And then I did my lettering in my silver Krylon metallic paint pen, and then I used a red brad. I chopped off the brad part and just glued it down with some glossy accents. So this is the finished page. I always have trouble knowing what you can see. And then this is the back. Now the back does not have all the bling, but I certainly used the stencils back here. I used I did some spraying with my yellow Delusions. I used the Punchinella with my blue Delusions. And then I have one of these and one of these that I flipped over, well, not this one, it would be this one, and then I sprayed it with my yellow and grunged it up a little with the blue, and that's where I documented the journal page. And then here again in the background, I have the shadow of her dancing, and then the music bar darkened around the edges and put the silver around it. So there is my show and tell portion of this video. I'm doing, the next segments will be a fast forward of all of the process of doing this page. And I'll kind of talk through the process. You can stop this video at this point if you're not interested in watching that. But if you do, I hope you enjoyed seeing this page, and subscribe to my channel. And I plan to be doing more journal pages for sure, other types of art projects in the future. This is the second segment of the video. Stick around and watch me hand cut some stencils and then use them to create the art journal page. This segment will be in fast forward, and I will discuss the process of using the stencils and making the page. I really had fun doing this. Start my project by figuring out the layout of my journal page, which is 8.5 by 11. And I choose an art book that I actually studied out of when I was in college. This is not the same book. I'm choosing some prints in here. I'm finding that a lot of the prints, the images that I like, are really too dominant for the size of page that I'm using. But I settle on Degas Dancer on stage print. And I use some weld bond, and now I'm going to collage down all these little pieces of text that I had when I cut these out of niches out of the book when I did the altered book with drawers earlier this year. I have a video of that online here on YouTube. So I collage them down on both sides of my paper. First, this is the 8.5 by 11 side, and then I go ahead and finish up the 6.5 by 11 side, because you'll see later on I actually cut a stencil out of that side piece. So I make sure everything is collaged down nice and strong, and put a coating of weld bond on top just to make sure everything is nice and secure. Put that aside to dry and clean off my craft mat. Nice and clean for the next part of my video. And here I am just kind of getting inspired, trying to think what stencils and what things that I'm going to use on this page. I'm really just choosing the stencils. I like that one right there. I wish it was more than just page. I tried some ink tints through there, and you can see where the three doves come out very nice. I end up not using it on my final page, but I'm going to use that again. Here I have a metal belt that I spray some craft paint wash through that I had made, and I really like the effect of that on the page too. This is just plain old copier paper. I'm really just getting inspired by trying different stenciling techniques. That was a lace curtain, and I sprayed some Delusions, brown chocolate Delusions through there. Here's some crocheted and some lettering, some Tim Holtz grunge board, punched the letters out of it. Really happy with what's going on here. I'm using that lace piece again on the back, and this is more just to inspire me, to get me thinking stencil. So I'm putting some alphabet letters on the back, and you'll see where I do a little rusty hinge down in the lower left corner. Very happy with how that turned out. I'll probably use this in another part of my art journaling. Sometimes it just takes me some time to get started. Here I'm just drying off my page a little. Now I'm thinking about cutting out a stencil out of Degas Ballerina. So what I do is I mount some cardstock on the back to strengthen that paper. So I'm going to make a stencil out of it. Bravely cut through the print. Brayer it down so it's nice and smooth, no air bubbles. And then I put a coating of weld bond on the front and again on the back. Okay, here I'm getting ready to cut my stencil. I'm drawing nice strong black lines around, defining the area that I want to cut out for the stencil on the ballerina. Here I'm actually cutting the stencil with a knife. I do not have an X-Acto knife. I broke it another time. I would say that when you're cutting a stencil, to keep your hand that's holding the paper away from the knife blade, always draw the knife blade towards you. Turn the paper, not the knife, when you're going around corners and curves. That works so much better. And as you can see, I'm finishing it up here. You see where I'm always turning that paper, and I'm always drawing that knife blade toward me, and I always turn the paper and not the knife. And here she is. She's all pulled out of the, punched out of the paper. I'm very happy with how that turned out. Now I'm using some color box mixed media inks. This is the first time I've really used these in a project, and I'm really liking them so far. I don't like how the lid closes on the on the ink pad, though. It doesn't stay very secure, so I secured it with rubber band. Here I'm using my music stencil, just playing around in my figuring book. How do I want it to look? And I do another one where I use the stencil as a mask and my color box mixed media ink. And I get out another flower stencil and stencil around that to add some more elements to the page. I'm tracing around her right now. There, I'm doing the flower stencil. Just adding, just really just playing and getting inspired to do my final page. Now, tracing the outline around my other one. Very happy with what's happening. My collage paper down to an 8.5 by 11, and you'll see I have a 6.5 by 11 piece left over that I decided I'm going to cut another ballerina stencil out of. So I get out my ballerina and trace around her, and get out my X-Acto knife and cut out another stencil. Now I will say that when you're cutting a stencil, make sure that you have a sharp blade, and that's one thing I like about these knives that I'm using, that when I want to change my blades, I just get out my pliers and snap off to the next level down, and it gives me another sharp point. I like that about those knives. Always keep that knife cutting towards you, and keep your other hand out of the way up above where you're cutting, and you'll avoid slipping and cutting yourself. There's my finished stencil. I have all sorts of ballerinas to use now. Now I get out my figuring book and write down the quote that I'm going to use. She is like a ballerina in an old music box. I really like that quote. Blocking out a layout. Going to plan out how my journal page might look. And you'll see that I actually decided I want some masks, so I used 6 pages of copier paper and trace around and staple that paper together and cut out some masks out of copy paper. Now if I do this again, I'm going to use a stronger paper, and I'm going to coat them with weld bond so that they'll be strong and they won't curl up when you spray them with a wet wash. I find this copy paper, once it gets wet, it just kind of curls up on you. It's a little bit difficult to work with. First time I've done that. I have all sorts of ballerinas to work with. I end up using 3 of them. And I'll arrange them down there. And I am putting some wavy lines in there and start to plan out where I'm going to put my quote. You'll see I'll start writing it down there. She is like a ballerina in an old music box. I just like that quote. I think it's a very priceless quote. It may have been meant to mean something else, but I think that when I think of a ballerina, I think of something very delicate and priceless. Okay, now I'm attaching my ballerinas down to the paper because even there the hands are starting to curl up. And I'm going to spray it with some Delusions blue ink. And I don't want them to curl up. I want a nice sharp image. Now I spray it with some ink. Now if I would have stopped at this point, I really would have had a nice page in itself, but no, I had to keep going. So just playing around with how I want my ballerinas to look. I tried some of those Derwent metallic ink pens on for my lettering. I didn't like them, so I got out a Krylon silver paint pen, and that really stands out against the blue. I really like that. Now I'm using some inks to put in another ballerina, giving it a shadow effect in here. And I probably should have stopped before I put her on. You'll see that I use a music stencil, and that music stencil, as I spray through it and then flip to the other side of the page, I actually like what happened on the facing page, and I quit working on this page and start working on another layout on the facing page. Here I'm just outlining my letters with a black Sharpie pen to make them stand out. And here's where I do that stencil, and I spray through it, and I watch, I flip it, and I really like that dark music on the other side. So I get out my ballerina stencil again and put another ballerina on the facing page and start working on this layout. And this one is actually the one that I end up using on my real page. Now I really say that I do not go to this extent of planning when I do my journal pages. I usually work spontaneously, like what I am in these pages, for myself. But I have a lot of stencils to work with, and I wanted to see what they did. And I use some Punchinella there. I'm kind of saying, okay, this is the size of my page, and blocking it out for my final page. Ballerinas that I had cut out to archivers, and I made 4 copies of them and cut them all out. And here I'm showing you on the final page how I cut out 2 to a sheet. And I will say that when you're choosing a shape for your stencil, avoid a lot of intricate inner cuts. It's okay to have a lot of intricate areas around the edge, but if you get a lot of intricate cuts on the inner parts of your stencil, it's almost too hard to cut it by hand. You'll want to cut it with an electronic die cutter. So I cut out 2 ballerinas to a sheet, and you can see where I have some positive images of ballerinas that I collaged down into my figurine book, and I have 2 journal pages of my own to keep after I send out my final journal page. I usually don't go to this much pre-planning when I'm making a journal page, but this is fun that I'm having with cutting out these stencils actually from an art print, and I'm just having all sorts of fun doing it. So I'm creating several different journal pages, planning out what I really want to do when I send it out. Now I'm getting ready to work on my real journal page that I'm going to send out. So I'm masking off, blocking off an 8x10 area where the focus of my journal page is going to happen, and then I put a blue border around it with StazOn. The entire page is 8.5 by 11. So I'm testing out on my stencil area there what I'm going to use for the black area on the negative shape of that music stencil. I tried some metallic paint, and you'll see that it does not cover very well. It almost looks like a wood block print when I pull it, and I'm not really happy with that. And I want more dark area so that the silver notes of the music will stand out. You see, I'm marking that off with my Faber-Castell. I eventually end up using some black gesso, and you'll see that later on in this video. I put my stencil down on my sheet that I'm going to send out, and I use my silver Krylon paint pen to mark off those music notes. And the plan is for those to show through the black part that I put back down over the page. And I'll reinforce those again to make them bolder. You'll see that here in a minute. Right here, I'm reinforcing the silver notes on there. Now at this point in the video, I'm working with that black area. I'm still trying to resolve the issue of how to get that dark area around the music notes to show up. I try some stays on, and in fact I try 3 different types of stays on. Eventually I just start working on my ballerinas. This ballerina in the background is going to be a shadow of my dancing ballerina. I'm using some punchinella to give it some texture. And now I'm putting in the shadow portion over that punchinella. Now at this point, I get out my black gesso and, oh no, I get out my craft paint. I try the craft paint first, and well, what happens is I paint the wrong side of the stencil. So I put it in my figuring book, because that's what junk journals and figuring books are for, to catch all your mistakes. At least I didn't put it on the page. So I clean that off and get out my black gesso, and this resolves my problem. I paint the correct side of the stencil to put across the page, and I was really happy with the coverage that this gave. And I still have to draw out the music notes. I have enough black gesso that I can actually do 2 large tags, and you'll see that I also have some, I paint around those tags, the top and the bottom of them, and I get out some other tags, and I have enough gesso left that I can paint the backs of about 3 more tags. That's how I use up my black gesso so it doesn't go to waste. You'll see me do this several times in my projects. It's just something I do. Okay, now I'm back working on my page, drying off the gesso, and figuring out the placement of my ballerina. Here I'm going to play with some pearlescent spray, and it does not work how I want it to in my figuring book, so I put that aside. That does not go on my live page. I reinforce those notes again with my paint pen because I really want them to stand out, and now it is at the point to where I'm really happy with it. I have a nice dark background and my silver notes are showing through that page just like I want them to. And my ballerina shadow is dancing in the background. Kind of touch up some of the black area there, just to kind of smooth it off. Play with some punchinella. End up putting some blue on that background because I want it to be like a mirror of a music box. And I also play with some red. I want to give it some feminine pink touches on that page. It does not show up too much on the black, but it does up on the in the text area up on the top, and it just gives it a little sparkle to the page right there. Very happy with how that turned out. I'm darkening that shadow. I find I have to darken that shadow several times as I'm working, because as I work with my page it keeps fading into the background and I keep bringing it out again. It's getting there though. Now I spray some blue delusions on it, and now it's really starting to pop for me. Reinforce the borders with black and blue stays on, and working now with placing my ballerina. Now I'm going to glaze the page. And I'm still learning how to glaze. I put entirely too much on the page. I have enough to do that page and the 2 pages in my figuring book. So I'm still working with that. Okay, now I'm ready to start doing the lettering on my final page. She is like a ballerina in an old music box. Use my Krylon silver paint pen, really pops. I'm putting in, darkening that shadow. I find that I have to do that several times on this page to keep bringing it out. Getting ready to collage down one of my ballerina die cuts. Position her on the page so she fits between the lettering. Make sure that she's nice and secure. Now I'm putting some black and silver bling on my page. I find that this bling just adds a little bit more sparkle to the page. I say that the bling makes the page sing. I think I have about 12 of those black bling embellishments and close to 22 of the silver bling that I put across the music. And you'll see me attach all of those. I do it really fast so you won't get bored. See how fast I'm working there? I really like the sparkle that it adds to this page. Now my page is getting really close to being finished, but I decide that I want to make the lettering pop a little bit more, so I get out my black Faber-Castell pen and outline all of those letters in black, and that makes them pop too. That's commonly done in a lot of art journaling. That's a common art journal technique. Now, I finalize the page by adding some silver borders around the page, and I use some red bling that just adds a little sparkle to around her neck. So now I'm ready to work on the back, and this is where I use one of the stencils that, the double ballerina stencils that I cut out of the paper of my copy that I made over at Archivers. And there'll be 2 ballerinas dancing, and then I'll have a shadow one in the background. Place some punchinella down there for texture. Get out my blue dilution spray and spray it with blue. And then I use some yellow to give it a little bit more color in the background there. Blot it off. Now I'm masking off the ballerinas because I want to put in the shadow ballerina in the background. I use several different products on this. I use some bronzer, and I do like the bronzer, but I end up going with another black dilution spray. And although I don't show that on this video, I do spray that with fixative so that it will not rub off. So now I'm working with my ballerinas. I spray one of them with yellow dilutions and mat it down to tone it down. That's going to be my journaling spot. Cleaning off my stencil here. Attaching some of my papers that I want to save in my figuring book for future reference. Saving off my ballerina stencils. Now I'm getting ready to collage down those 2 ballerinas. Of course, I use a magazine when I'm doing my gluing. Brayer it down, make sure it's nice and secure. This one will be used for my journal spot. Very happy with how this page is turning out. I've got a back and a front that's almost 2 journal pages in one. Block off the edges, the borders, and you'll see later on I'll put a silver border on the back too. reattach that red bling on the front, make sure it's nice and secure. So here is the finished journal page. I'm just showing it to you again. This is the front, and then this is the back. So I've used my stencils on the back. I've used the music stencil and then the ballerina stencils that I cut out. I use one as a journaling spot, and then the other just as a photocopy of the one that I cut out of the text page there. Works very well on my page. And I'm just showing you how I flipped the other one over, and I matted it with, toned it down with some Delusions and used it as my journal page there, a journaling spot. Showing you the different areas, and they're showing you the dancing ballerina in the background, the shadow. I used the punchinella, and then I outlined it with silver. So this is the back, and this is the front. Now I hope that you've enjoyed watching this video, and if you have, please subscribe to my channel, because I do plan to be doing more art journaling in the future. Thank you.